Ronan was one of many people who used to visit my building, and I was talking to many people by this time about my idea for a radio on a ship, because I was looking for backers, and he was full of praise. He's always full of praise when he wants something. And he offered immediately to take me over to meet his father, who was a rich man in Ireland. And I was very keen to meet possible backers. So I flew with him, within a day or two, to Ireland. And his father took me in his car, beautiful car, to the border, where he had control of a port which was no longer in use, but which would be very convenient for surreptitiously erecting a new radio mast on the ship when we had it. Part of the plot, which I didn't know when I first met him and met his father, was that the father would get possession of the key to the whole thing, which was a copy of the QC's opinion as to why it could be legal. And innocently, I gave him a copy, and he must have given it to Ronan, who then was able to run around showing this to his backers.
But this time he was armed with a stack of papers like this, and sort of sat like this. It was much more, you know, a small survey on the south coast. I remember his exact words. A small survey on the south coast has been carried out, and we have established the fact that if a ship, and this was it, you know, this was the pitch, a ship was parked off the coast in the sea 3 miles outside with a transmitter on it, the whole fucking country would tune in and turn on, and that's it.
There can be no copyright on this idea. I mean, there have been 11 commercial radio stations on ships before, and it's idiotic to think that it's any single person's idea. It's not an invention. This is a fact. What happens is that Ronan took this fact and put it into operation.
And do you know anybody that'd be interested in that, do you think? You know, maybe put a few bob into it and so on. I said, yes, I certainly can. Think of old Daddy. And you know, we went from here. By now, I suppose we'd met in the Kenya at 2 o'clock, and it was now 5 o'clock or whatever. And I had an MGB. We didn't pause. He grabbed the papers, we got in the car, the three of us, and we went straight to Hazelmere, which is where my father lived.
There was a collection of people who had money. I think to a certain degree they had made a lot. These guys, they were in their, you know, 60s, a lot of them. And they had made a lot of money. And I think it wasn't all it had been made out to be, the making of the money. And they were quite bored by it, where they were at that, you know, certain amount of them. And this project was quite exciting.
And, I mean, my father simply went for it right away. And I think he said he had a few friends. He'd see if he had a few friends, he would see if they fancied a punt, you know, a flutter. It was a flutter for a few people who he knew. The most main person, apart from my father, was Jocelyn Stevens. I think he was the next biggest of these vaguely, paradoxically establishment sort of figures, who in fact weren't, in some strange way, weren't really establishment figures, you know, who had sort of something that they wanted to change. So I think Jocelyn certainly did, you know. There was a sort of schoolboy part of Jocelyn, I think, that saw it in a kind of boy's own level.
As we were outside the law, whose law we were within? And we were within our own. So did a signature on a piece of paper, a piece of radio Caroline paper, but did it have any authority? So that led us to living in a way that was I mean, most of the business was in cash. Quite a lot of it, therefore, went astray, inevitably.
Chris Moore had been in the Merchant Navy for about half an hour at one point. He was purser on a cruise liner. And so he became in charge of everything to do with nautical matters and had to go to Copenhagen or somewhere with about 10,000 quid in a suitcase and buy a ship. Which he did.
Anyway, the next day, I flew to Dallas to a place called Continental Electronics, who were the transmitter company. And on the way over, magazines on the plane, and opened this magazine. It was this headline, Caroline Smiles and Disrupts Government. And it was a series of pictures with Jack Kennedy. I mean, the story was there were various powerful people waiting to have some major international conference or something, and he's playing with his daughter. And I just, that was it. I mean, I just saw Caroline, and I thought, that's the name, Radio Caroline. And literally, it was named to sort of, you know, link in with that Kennedy, the idealism, the hope, the possibility of things were going to be different.
At this time, we're indeed pleased to have with us in our studios Mr. John F. Kennedy, son of Ambassador and Mrs. Joseph P. Kennedy, who is known to his friends as Jack Kennedy.
Suddenly, here was a ship in Greenore Harbor, which wasn't exactly known for anything kind of controversial, with this huge, great 190-foot mast on it, 186 or something. That stirred a lot, and that was the biggest sort of crisis moment, because a local newspaper got into it, and they were told that it was for searching for sponges. I remember that was the story we gave the local. And they did a piece on it, you know, about this aerial sort of that was up there, went down through the boat, you know, and sort of had an eye on it. They went around looking for sponge.
The Irish, who by that time got the idea that Caroline was something was anti-English and therefore were wholly pro, and have a wonderful sense of humor anyway. They thought this was terrific. So, and I remember one day I was going about, we were so absolutely bedeviled with the need to be secret that we had all these code names, and I'd forgotten what Greenore was called. I intentionally did, because I dreaded sort of blurting it out in one sleep, so to speak. And I can't remember what the hell this place is called. I can't remember the code name. Nobody else says it anymore. I can't remember the telephone number. So I'd sort of written on a piece of paper and swallowed. And suddenly the man, so I was standing at the airport, Dublin, and the man came up to me and said, you wouldn't be after visiting the sponge-fishing vessel in Greenore. I said, quiet, quiet, you know.
But there was another surprise to come. A second pirate radio ship with a different group of backers was nearing completion. This was Radio Atlanta.
Alan Crawford, 42-year-old Australian music publisher, is the boss behind this outfit.
I couldn't find another port in which to fit out my ship, the Mi Amigo, and had to be using his father's port as originally agreed. And we were tied up against his ship, which was bigger, and all the time getting a kind of Irish mafia treatment of things disappearing and so on. You could never put your finger on who was doing what, but we were being delayed all the time. I mean, a comedy in a way.